I swear, right when the second I click start streaming, I'm like, oh, I haven't done the audio check. Every single time. Every single time I click start stream, I remember to check the audio. Welcome to the stream. We have some announcements today. We have some things to talk about. I'm going to wait for a few more people to show up. I saw that Rinzai was in the house. Excuse me. I think that's Discord telling everybody that I went live. Hell yeah. Look at that. That's got to be a record. That's got to be a record for fastest Discord tell. By the way, my microphone has got to be too loud. I'm peaking it. That has me nervous. I guess go back down to 18. But now the question is, while we're waiting for people, a couple more people, Rinzai. The question is, do we carry on with the conversation that we ended on last week? Or do we do the same thing? Do we, I feel like I'm in this tiny little window. Like, something about this looks weird. It looks like I'm living inside a postcard. It's odd. That's better, right? It looks like I'm a human. Digression. I'm very good at that. I'm very good at digressing from the original point that I was making and going off on several tangents that all kind of loop back in eventually, but they're going to take me a hot minute. Kind of want to try something. The problem is I just don't know. I don't know who are bots and who are. I really struggle to understand when a Twitch user is a bot versus a real person. Like, it's hard to tell based on the name. Sometimes the names are like super obvious. It's like LXI804, you know, and it doesn't, like, it just looks like it was a random number generator. You can play text-based ball. Yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea. Because I'm going to play If on a Winter's Night for sure, because I want to finish that game, because this will be the first time that I've been able to actually get through an entire game in a stream. Like, I've never been able to do that before. And we're not far off. I think we only have 1 or 2 more little vignettes to get through. Not get through, but enjoy. Then definitely finish the real game. I wouldn't say it's a real game. I mean, how do you even define that? Because these guys are indie developers. They're not like, you know, it's not EA. It's not Ubisoft that published If on a Winter's Night for Travelers. But I'm definitely going to finish that one because, like I said, I've been trying. Yeah, Bungie. um, it's not going to. What am I saying there? Oh, I'm definitely going to finish it because I actually can. Like, it's a game that's actually short enough that I can finish it, and it's like available on Steam. You know what I mean? Like it's a, you know, like it won awards, and like there's a company that like made it. You know what I mean? I think it's just a guy and his wife. I think that's they're the, and they also have like some other people I think that worked with them. There's also AMI 2.0 and some other indie games like Wrath of Woods game, for instance. Yeah, I know. I've played everybody's games, and I will continue to play their games. We do one of these every week. I think that the stream is big enough to kind of do a little bit of all of it. It would have been fun to have played Wrath of Woods game, that one that was submitted to Dream Jam. That would have been pretty cool. That one could be fun to play on stream. It's really wild, really super interesting and weird. But my computer wants to eat me. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that one. Yep. That game is very impressive. It was very impressive. I also want to play more Two Links games. I miss that guy. I always loved his games. Sorry, I'm checking something real quick. He hasn't like really made anything. Did you beat it? I think I did. I'm pretty sure I beat it. It was a while ago though. I can't remember how long it was, honestly. And also beat it. I mean, people have different definitions of beat it. Like when I get through a play of a game, I'm like, okay, I beat it. And then everybody in the chat's like, now go back and get the other 4 endings. It's like, what? No. I beat it. I beat it. I got my ending. I beat it. That's always been my definition. I don't think I've ever gone back to a game that I've finished and played it again to the end. Now, granted, most of the games that are like go back and get the other endings, it takes me about 18 seconds to get there. But I've never gone through an entire game again and then chosen something different for a different ending. That's never happened. For like a game that I've purchased, you know what I mean? I'm kind of interested in that whole concept in general, like why people value it so highly. Because it's the only medium in which it is valued, right? Like nobody's like, oh, I wish we could go back and get a different ending for the film. I mean, I guess they do, but not in the same way. You don't really like. Because there is no choice involved when it comes to reading novels or watching television, but like, I mean, okay, choose your own adventure novel, but like, it's the only medium in which it is possible. Yeah, right. And so like, but the thing that's interesting about the idea of an ending and multiple endings for any given thing, like, endings are kind of hard to build because they are like they need to reflect everything that the story has been telling up to that point. You know what I mean? And I find a lot of multiple ending games, it's like there's the one true ending, and then there's the other two, which are like, I don't know, lip service. Like they're not really, it's kind of like it negates the entire point of why you did the things that you did in a narrative, and I don't understand why they're included, right? Like, I want a satisfying end to the story, and I don't care if there's others, so long as the one I'm getting is satisfying. Exactly, so it makes you feel like your choices matter. Exactly, you have to make a lot of decisions. Yeah, but it makes you feel like your choices matter, but oftentimes you know that they don't, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you do as Captain Shepard, you're still going to fight what's-his-name at the end of Mass Effect 1. because it has to. Like, that's the point of that narrative, is to culminate in this boss in which you're fighting like the shadow form of Captain Shepard. You know what I mean? And then like at the end you can be like, okay, which girl do you want, the redhead or the brown girl or the brown haired girl? You know, and it's like, what? Like, what the fuck does that matter? They do it if it changes the course. What do you mean? They do what if it changes the course? Because yeah, like, no, what's they do. I don't understand what you're saying. Aliens, okay. I don't understand what you're saying. The point I'm trying to make is that, let's say you're telling a story about, I don't know, for example, Luke Skywalker, right? Luke Skywalker starts as a young boy who has no future and all he wants is a grand adventure, right? And the story ends with him like at the royal court on some other planet receiving a medal from the Queen for becoming like the greatest young warrior in the history of the galaxy, who saved the rebellion and da 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 da. You know what I mean? Like he's a absolute hero. That's what he wanted. And then like you get to the end of the game version of that story and it's like he becomes the hero, but like there's also these other two endings where like he lets the Empire take over and then he goes into hiding. But none of the other choices that you made as Luke in the Star Wars game reflect that ending, right? The reason why Luke's ending is because that was his goal and he achieved it because he became one with the Force, right? So you can't have like that beginning and then that ending. Like you can't have the like, and then Luke went into hiding because he made like a really weird choice in the third act that he didn't realize was going to be impactful. You know what I mean? Like it's a strange, and then it makes the narrative feel weird. I've always felt like that. That's why I just kind of pretend like there's not other endings. You know, I just try to make sense of the narrative, that whichever one I get, you know. Let's see. Okay, but what if Luke Skywalker joined the dork side? Okay, so the short form of this is that game designers don't know how to write a game with multiple endings. Yeah, because you'd have to write multiple stories. That's why. Like, the problem is that the ending would have to reflect, like, in character creation. You know what I mean? Like, it would be it's way too much. I had to think a lot about this for my visual novel, especially my recent update. Exactly. It takes more work. Yeah, I mean, you would literally have to you'd have to rewrite the game 3 times. You know what I mean? Like, if you had 3 endings, you'd have to rewrite the game 3 times. Like, that's the kind of the problem. Because if you were to start the game, you'd have to pick, or you'd have to fall into it. I don't know. This is something that we could actually talk about. I'm really interested in this because, like, common narrative structure, and I don't know anything about Eastern narrative structure, so I'm going to talk about Western. But common narrative structure in the Western mode, right? Hero's journey. I'm struggling to even think of how you would do it, other than like you choose your ending basically at the beginning of the game. You don't know you're choosing your ending, but like when you start the game, you have your protagonist. It could even be a named protagonist, like, you know, Mass Effect. Okay, let's say that there's Mass Effect with 3 endings. But let me read the chat first. Each story reflects a different part of the world and the protagonist. For me, I already want to write all those endings anyway. Each story reflects a different part of the world and the protagonist. Each story is in like each story that leads to a different ending in a game, or each story is in each story which is told in the world. For me, I already want to write all those endings anyway. If only I'd been obsessed with this for more than 4 years, then I could actually have something to say. You'll get there, don't worry. I mean, I would say that you have more to say about this than basically anybody else I've ever met except for me. So, but anyway, so let's say we're remaking Mass Effect, right? No, I mean I was okay. Okay, so we're remaking Mass Effect. There's 3 endings. That means that when you start the game, you pick the background of Captain Shepard, right? And you kind of do anyway, because you pick like his class and like some other things, right? I think you even, there's some things that you get to pick in that, right? Isn't there some like backgroundy stuff, like he was a soldier or he was a politician, or like I can't remember actually. It's been years since I played that game. But I want to say that there was something to that effect. But herein lies the problem, right? Like, if you were to pick politician for Captain Shepard, then his ending has to be goddamn different. Because it's a different character. And all the things that you're building into the concept of a politician Captain Shepard need to bear out in the narrative. Rather than just like soldier, there's soldier Captain Shepard, and you can be a red or a blue. And the red or the blue determine how much people like you at the end. Like, you get slightly different dialogue choices. And then you go into the exact same boss fight no matter what. Right? And your friends help you because, versus if you really wanted to have impact and narrative, what you would have to do is like rewrite it so that if you went politician, then the ending of your Mass Effect game would be like a grand debate, right? It would be like a really intense dialogue where you'd have to like debate with people and like try and bring order to the galaxy, and like, you know what I mean? Like that would be a more fitting ending to the politician Shepard. I never played Ass Effect. Oh, something that effect. Of course, it has to be different. Yeah. The problem is convergence without acknowledging setup or payoff. Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, I'll have to run a theory by you. This will take a while to type. You go ahead and type. I'm going to keep chatting. I'm going to keep talking about this concept. So, I think the other... Right. Only 2 people on Twitch.tv think about this. Apparently. So, but here's the other thing, though, is... The other tactic, I would say, that game developers tend to go with when they're making a narrative, and this I think might be the stronger version. I wish we could watch Mr. B-Tongue videos on here, because I really like Mr. B-Tongue. I think his videos are so cool, and he stopped making them for some reason, but God, he was so cool. Anyway, so he made this really cool video. Oh, I don't want to talk about his video. You just watch his videos. But the other... The other tactic I would say that is often used in narrative-driven games is like kind of the grand story itself is pretty vague, right? Like, I'm thinking Pillars of Eternity here, where like they write it in such a way that it almost doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what the beginning is and it doesn't matter what the ending is by design, where what's more important and what's more interesting to the player are the side characters, right? Those are the people that follow you around. So like Pillars of Eternity is like a classic RPG style, like isometric party based sword and sorcery RPG. And you, the person, don't go through a whole lot of emotional change in the game. Like, your character doesn't go through a great deal of emotional change. You do select some very interesting and cool things. Like, so for example, the character that I made in Pillars of Eternity, they ask you what your goal is, right? and you have a list of goals that you can choose from, and my goal was to find love. I want to find love, which, because I just thought it was so cool. Like, what a weird thing for a character to want to do in a high fantasy narrative. So that's what I selected, and I never got far enough. I never actually ended up beating that game to see if that bore fruit. I mean, why else would you be able to select it? But like, I loved that concept so much, because then I was really waiting in anticipation for it to start to bear out. Like, it would drop some NPCs into the game that would become more meaningful, like romantically, you know what I mean? But it never happened, and I was like 60% of the way through the game, and I was like, I don't know if any of that mattered. But who knows? Maybe it actually does come up, and I stopped too soon. But what was I going to say? Oh, but the interesting thing about that was that I was watching the characters around me go through great deals of change, right? Like, I knew the characters around me much better than I knew my own character. Like, the guy wanted to find his brother, and then we went to find his brother, but the body was gone, but there was like a letter there, so he had like a little mystery story. And then there was the wizard guy who was like possessed by a demon, and that was really interesting. And stuff like that. There was, one of my buddies was like trying to find an old book or some shit, and like, it was just cool. Like, it was interesting to watch that play out. And the main story was just kind of fell to the background. Like, I didn't even really know what was going on in the main story. It was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you go to this town because there's like some people there that might have something to do with what you're doing, maybe, and then you go there and they talk about it, and you're reading it and you're like, yeah, okay, this has something to do with it. And then you're supposed to go somewhere else. But it wasn't like this very trackable arc through the narrative, you know what I mean? Which it must be by design, because it's just simply too difficult to program all of those different variable outcomes, because you can be like 5 different races, you can be 2 different genders, you can have 18 different classes that would all have a different ending, like, there's just so many different things. So the solution to this problem is to just kind of like scale it back, the main narrative, make that part vague, make it more about the friends you make along the way, kind of like D&D, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's going to be like shitting their absolute pants because of like the complete D&D narrative for its, its narrative structure and shit, which is, maybe that's fine. It probably is fine. Anyway, I'm going to go back and read this novel by one Rinzai. All right, so imagine there's a world with multiple characters on multiple strata of a fictional universe, and everything fits into this bizarre, mysterious system, and each character has a different set of political agendas and philosophical outlooks. But one protagonist is caught in the midst of all of this, and depending on the things he says and the deals he makes, he leans into one ideology or another. By the way, in the words of Built to Spill, there's nothing wrong with love. I love Built to Spill. The first 2 acts are spent gravitating to one character or in an elaborate maze of intersecting scenes, and according to an inbuilt hidden system, the story gets streamlined into one of 4 unique paths, each of which depicts a different part of the world that would only be available to a character who has gone down one of the 4 or so available routes. Each route sums requires the character to change along a different arc, tragic or comic, good or evil, like a Punnett square or one of the D&D grids pertaining to chaos and good. Yeah, totally. I love the idea of the world changing as a result of... Because how else can you even reflect it? Like, how else can you indicate that meaningful change took place as a result? So here's the thing that was really interesting. We can talk about Mr. B-Tongue here. Did somebody say D&D? Everyone said D&D. That's exactly true. In my opinion, the characters are key to a good D&D campaign. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, that is the thing, right? Like, it's not so much the grand arc of the narrative, right? It's not so much, can Luke save the day against the Empire, who's trying to destroy the evil rebels, because the Empire is made up of these people. Psych, it's his dad too, and like, oh shit, that's his sister. Like, you can't really, it's hard to get away with that. That's why I also wonder, we'll get to that in a second. No, I want to get to this now. This is probably a more interesting thing now. So there's a little story. You might have heard of it. It's called The Great Gatsby. So The Great Gatsby is a very interesting novel. And I know I'm sounding like a... Fuck. One second. I gotta turn on the light. I know I'm sounding like your high school English teacher right now, but like, The one of the most interesting things about Great Gatsby is that the protagonist of the novel is not the protagonist. If you'd made different decisions, you'd see a different part of the world. Yes, exactly. You did seem like a Built to Spill fan. I am a Built to Spill fan. But what's interesting is that novel works, right? Like, I'm forgetting the names. Oh my God, what are the names of the characters? Okay, so there's the main guy. There's the protagonist. And he's kind of just like, I got a house in a weird part of New York, and my neighbor's pretty crazy. Jay Gatsby. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, Jordan, Daisy, Jay Gatsby, and then I forget the main character's name, because you're not supposed to remember the main character's name because he's an inconsequential character, right? The novel is not about that guy. The novel is not about the protagonist. The novel is about Gatsby. That's why it's called The Great Gatsby. Right? And he's the one who goes, like, him and Daisy, yeah, basically Fitzgerald. He and Daisy are the one who go through the narrative arc, right? And the protagonist kind of just reports on it. But the novel works really well. And it made me wonder why that's not something that happens a little bit more in other mediums. John Carraway. Yeah, that sounds right. John Carraway? Jack Kerouac? No, I'm just kidding. But why hasn't that structure been adopted? I mean, maybe it has and I missed it, but that kind of narration is perfect for games where the player fits better in an... Exactly, right? Like, what you're doing is you're following... I would imagine it's hard to write, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine... Great Gatsby should have been hard to write. It must have been. But, like... It is a very simple story. You know what I mean? Now, maybe writing it in game form would be... I don't know. What's that game? What's that game by the guy that made the Shadow of the Colossus? It was Shadow of the Colossus. It was the one with the big dog bird. Last Guardian. And then there's the one before those two. Is it called Ico? Is that what it's called? Nick Carraway. That's right, Nick Carraway. Ico. Probably Ico. So those three games, I would say, kind of fit that structure. Maybe not so much The Last Guardian. Actually, I'm really only thinking of Ico. But in correct me if I'm wrong, I've actually never played the game. I've watched gameplay of it, but I've never played it. But when that game is very much about, like, companionship and you watching, like, you're trying to, like, protect a princess and lead her through this dangerous world, right? And the princess is the one that goes on the grand, like, she's the one that has the more recognizable narrative arc, I would imagine. I'm not sure though. But I really like that idea though, because it actually excuses a lot of the things that you end up doing in games because they're games, right? Like, this is a problem I'm going to have with every game, even though I accept it and I'm fine with it. But like I go back to the Cyberpunk 2077 example again, where it's like you have 2 weeks to live, and then your character's like, I'm going to go out and rob some banks, dog. Like, and he just goes out and robs banks. And you, like, you steal drugs and, like, but it doesn't lead to a point. It's not like steal the drugs so that I can pay my doctor. Like, when I first went to the Doc Ripper guy, and he was the one who tells you that you have, like, the whatever problem, and he's like, you're gonna die, kid, and you're like, fuck, and so you go out. I thought I was gonna have to, like, make payments to this guy to, like, keep going, you know, like, I thought I was gonna have to, like run out there and, like, steal money or, like, do jobs for shady people, but then none of it happened. It didn't matter. It was just like there was a punk rocker guy in my head. I'm like, okay, I love CDPR, and I actually really did like Cyberpunk 2077, but, like, this speaks to a larger issue in games and game narrative, in that things just get really thrown off and wonky. Like I go from like leaping across buildings and I'm shooting people and I'm stealing cars and getting away from the police, and then like I'm walking down the stairs and then my guy goes, bah! And he falls down and he's like, I got a headache. You know, it's just like, it doesn't, I can't have 2 weeks to live and jump across rooftops at the same time. Like the narrative just doesn't, it's smacking against itself, you know? The Lost Guardian, Eco. I like those stories though. They feel weird to write. Yeah, I use this technique a lot in KDHW. Oh, okay. The principal characters are all gods or mortals, but you're just the middleman, a tragic death, and you are death. Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, that actually might be why I've always found that those narratives are so weirdly compelling, despite like them not meeting, you know, many of the criteria that I have for like keeping me engaged in a narrative. But that, I find that interesting. That's a really verbose phrase for that. What's its ludonarrative dissonance? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, ludonarrative dissonance. Everybody hates that term, but like I think it's just because it's misused. Right? Like the problem with ludonarrative dissonance is that people think that any form of gameplay mixed with story means bad art. And like that's not what, I don't think that's what that means. I don't think that's what it needs to mean. Ludonarrative dissonance to me is like when you're playing Far Cry and you're running around and you're shooting guys on this island because you're fighting for your survival, and then you run out of ammo and you look down and you can't just pick up one of the 1,000 guns around you. You know what I mean? Like that to me speaks louder as a ludonarrative dissonance where like you are the scrappy dude. You know what I mean? Like you're the scrappy dude who's outnumbered. That should be a mechanic. Like that should be the structure of the game, is that you're you know, picking up weapons in the beginning from people you kill, from the limited shit you have, right? And they had it in Far Cry 2. Like Far Cry 2 is one of the most interesting games I've ever played because it feels like you're playing Heart of Darkness. Right? Like it's based on the narrative and it's so brutal and it leaves just enough to your interpretation. Like you have a goal, you need to find the guy in the forest, well, in the African whatever, I can't remember what country you're in. You need to find the guy who's dealing the guns, right? And he's Colonel Kurtz. And as you go, it just gets darker and darker and weirder and weirder and weirder. But like at all the same time, it never loses its sense of like just doom. Like it's doomed what you're doing. Everything around you is doomed. And it was so convincing and so immersive. I found that so fucking interesting comparatively to the later ones where it becomes kind of like a party game with guns. Yeah, I don't know. Ludonarrative dissonance is hated because game designers don't consider story first. Okay, I don't think they know why stories appeal to people. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. It didn't occur to me that being able to pick up people's weapons is a great idea until I saw Team Fortress 2, that goofy-ass game. Yeah. I think picking weapons up is best in Curse of Monkey Island 1997. Is this a reference that I'm not understanding? I'm assuming so. But the... Okay, but let's go back to the original point I was going to make about Mr. B-Tongue. So, Mr. B-Tongue, YouTube channel, go watch it. It's really cool. He only made like 12 videos, but like all of his videos were fucking awesome. I loved them. I thought they were so interesting. And in my opinion, he was kind of like he was like a progenitor of the idea of like game analysis from like, not simply reviews. It was like he was analyzing the concepts of narrative and game together, right? He's a huge inspiration for this channel, actually. But one of the things he talks about, well, there's a video that he made called Choice and Consequence, right? And Choice and Consequence is really interesting because it's like the idea of how RPGs sell you on what you're doing, right? It's like, check out our new RPG. It's unbelievable. Every single thing you do matters, right? From like the doors you open, the rocks you pick up, different ending for everything. depending on which time you put a thing in your pocket versus put it in your backpack, you know? And that's it's like a marketing term, like choice and consequence in games. Every choice you make has a consequence, right? And the argument, oh no, I picked the wrong rock, exactly. But the argument that Mr. B-Tongue makes is like, first of all, this has already been done forever. Like this isn't like a thing that is particularly novel or noteworthy, because games have been doing this since at least Fallout, like the original Fallout. And second, what is being billed as choice and consequence is not really consequence, right? Because like the example he uses, I think, is in Mass Effect 2. And he says that like there's a thing that happens in Mass Effect 2 where if you don't go talk to one of your friends, or if you have a not very nice conversation with one of your friends in Mass Effect 2 before the end of the game, they die at the end, right? And it has nothing to do with the conversation, right? Like you don't go on and then fight with them and then they get killed during the fight at the end of the game. It's just if you said something mean to them, they will die. And it's even weirder because it's like the character just doesn't make it to the door and they close it and then they die or something. Like it doesn't even seem to have anything, you know, it's like the weirdest version of butterfly effect ever, where like it's like, well, if you stepped on the butterfly in Act 1, then sorry, Tina's dead. You know, it's so strange. It was such a strange idea for how to imbue a game with choice and consequence, where what he says about the inverse of this, though, is in the original Fallout game, there was this idea of what you were walking around with your vault dweller, like you are the vault dweller in Fallout, and the whole point of this game is that your dog, Baloo, it's a chair, you can't dig it. The whole point of this game is that your vault's water supply machine breaks. So you have to go out into the wasteland to figure out if there's some way for you to fix it or somebody else out there, right? And in the early game, you go and you talk to people and they start saying like, oh, where do you come from? You know, what are you doing? Why? And you always have the option, well, I came from a vault just over the mountain, right? It's just right over, oh shit, it's just right over there, you know? You have this option. You have this dialogue option. If you tell enough people this, the next time you return to the vault, everybody's going to be murdered, right? Because there's an innate cause and effect. If you tell a wasteland filled with bandits that there's a bunch of people who are defenseless over the mountain, eventually you're going to tell enough wrong people. And they're going to go do it. They're going to go do that thing, right? And this is a payoff to a choice. You are rewarded, even though it's a negative, you are rewarded for game actions that you take, right? And that is very meaningful. And the only reason why that is meaningful and the other one isn't is because of causality. And making that causality is really, really important, even though I just said that. I'm stalling because there was another point I was trying to make. Oh, but then he brings up Wasteland 2, right, in this video as well. And he says that there are two things that happen in Wasteland 2 that are very interesting. Number one is you were given the choice between two quests, right? You don't know anything about these two towns. There's just they're in Wasteland 2, you leave your home base and then two towns at the same time say, "We need water." And then the other one says, "No, we need water." And now you choose who gets water. But you don't know anything about town A, you don't know anything about town B. You haven't been told anything about them. It's just make a choice between them, right? And then you choose one, and then like later it's like, well, man, if only I had chosen town B. Now I would be able to, you know, the princess lived in town B. I didn't know, you know. But it's so like who gives a shit? Like it's a complete non sequitur in a narrative. Because there is no causality to it. It's just you were given a choice and blah, 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 you know. But then later in the exact same game in Wasteland 2, there's a moment where one of your companions you find out, has been part of like a band of slavers, right? And right then and there, you can decide whether or not you want to kick her out of your group. And what he said was that decision was so much more impactful and so much more interesting to me because there was a lot of things that were playing into it. I needed her, right? She was my only sniper or whatever. I needed her. Was my character willing to let go of their own sense of morality in order to bolster their own security? Was, how, like, now you're starting to make moral and ethical debates with yourself and your character and the world itself. And it's all as a result of just like clever writing, and attaching more emotional weight rather than just like town A or town B, choice and consequence. Let's see, there's many things I haven't read. Right, the decisions have to weigh upon the character. Yeah, okay. You can hide details, but the important moments ought to feel more decisive. Yeah, you can hide details, sure, but I think that there should be causality, right? Definitely should be causality. And leading back to the original thing that kind of brought this up is the whole idea of the ending, right? Where there's the ending, which is the one that has causality, and then there's like the other two. Or the other three, which have no causality. Because nothing else in the game really makes any sense. Doesn't really fit, right? Like even in a game like, what was that game called? You get electrical superpowers. Ah, come on. What the hell's it called? Infamous. So in Infamous, you're like an electro superhero guy. You can shoot like electricity out of your fingers, and you can be like, they have like the Renegade Paragon system. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed that game. I thought it was a relatively fun like superhero RPG thing, but the narrative is incredibly forgetful, and partially is because it just doesn't really matter. Like you can be a huge dick and you'll still get the girl in the end, kind of thing. Like she's not like, oh, that's it, I'm leaving you. It's just like she has red hair at the end, It's so weird. It's such a strange thing to do. Because it's like you're playing the game as a villain. You know what happens to villains? They fucking die at the end of the game. They die at the end of the movie, right? They go to jail. There should be causality for that. If you're being a huge dick, I think it's partially because game developers and game designers and probably game company owners and producers and people who pay for these things look at it and they're like, what? You can't send the 12-year-old kid who bought our game to jail. He picked red. Big whoop. He picked red. He beat the game. He paid $60. He paid $60 for the game. Well, then he's a hero. And it doesn't matter if you punch the old lady, all right? If you punch the old lady, he still is a hero. And he gets $1 million at the end of the game, and the girl likes him. All right? You hear me? That's what I imagine is going on. Let's see. Good choices affect 1, the character, 2, the world, and 3, the audience. Yes. And they are all very much intertwined. Because if you affect the world and the character impactfully, meaningfully, you'll affect the audience. Sometimes there's more meaning in deciding which card to pick in a deck builder than there are in choosing between 2 dialogue choices in a game about choices making a difference, or 3 choices that only cause the flavor to change a bit. Yeah, right. That was why in my game, not to like toot my own horn, but like that weird little disc jockey game I made, I don't even know what it's sitting at right now. I should check that just because I'm curious. But oh no, not new window. God, I haven't checked this in months. But in my game that I made with heavy help from many different Unity plugins, what was I gonna say? Oh, how I decided to attach consequence to dialogue choices was to like literally give them expenditure values, right? So the main character was a dick. He's a very rude person, and the polite options were more expensive to what was called his exasperation versus exasperation and something else meter. Crazy. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking. Analytics. It's got 16 downloads in like 2 years. But it was a very interesting idea, to me anyway, that there was like this value, there was this valuation placed on it, because what the idea was centered around the concept. Oh, Jesus, the idea was centered around the concept. The idea was, in most games, you have some kind of resource that you expend in order to affect the world, right? So like in a shooter, you have bullets. In an RPG game, you have bows and arrows, you have stamina, you have mana, you have some kind of resource that is replenishable, and you can expend it in order to affect the world, right? And so in my game, my expenditure was dialogue, right? You use dialogue to affect the world, so dialogue should have a cost. And if you were acting outside of character, it was more expensive. And if you let it get to the point, so it was kind of like this weird expenditure of like you're paying health to keep your character at an emotional equilibrium, right? And it did very interesting things in my mind, where I was like, that could be this could be a legitimate way to add value to dialogue, because a lot of the time I find dialogue to be completely useless in games. Like most of the dialogue could be done in more quickly in cutscenes, or like for example, I really, I don't know why, but I really like it in From Software games, because the writing is pretty and it's short, right? No character talks for more than a minute, and you don't really make any choices. You don't really, like, you can say like, yes, I'll help you, or no, go fuck yourself. But like, it's not really that's just saying like, I reject the side quest. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because like, on the one hand, I really like the idea of games with really great story. But on the other hand, I think I'm so fucking conditioned into thinking the games are not going to have a good story that that now there's like this other thing in my brain where it's like, don't waste my time, right? Don't waste my time with a bad story. And so I'm not even willing to give many game stories a chance, because as I'm playing it, it's like, oh my God, now I got to sit here and talk for 4 minutes with this guy. Holy shit. And then, my camera went out of focus. And then, yeah. And then I'm bummed because I got to sit there and talk to him. And I can't get back to the game because it's just like this weird thing that's stapled onto the game. Let's see. Let's go back and read some shit. If you're a dick, you're stuck with a redhead. Apparently. That's why you have to play for multiple endings. Yeah, but I don't like that. I don't like the idea of like, every ending should be satisfactory in its own right. Like I hate that. I think you're making a joke about the infamous thing I said earlier, though. Send the gamer to jail for shooting people. That's pretty based. I think it'd be great. Like, what happens at the end of Grand Theft Auto games? You're an absolute monster in those games. A monster. A full-on serial killer. And I get that those games are satire, right? And they're trying to be satire, and they're very much insulting everything about American culture. But even those games endings, I'm pretty sure, are quite unsatisfactory. It's like, what does Michael go into witness protection again? Let's see. Even Monopoly sends you to jail. That's very true. I don't know if Dave's lurking. I don't know what Dave's doing. Dave's doing his own thing. We appreciate Dave in all forms and all colors. How have I not seen and played this? Let me make that 17 downloads real quick. Hey, I'm gonna check. Hey, 17 downloads. Look at that. Yeah, let me know what you think. I actually thought it was really fucking cool, and I don't know why nobody like. It's probably because I never finished it. Maybe I'll finish that for the Finish It Jam. Oh shit. Let's see. I reject your side quest and substitute it with my own. I have a whole system worked out for this. Tragedies are satisfying because we would like to theorize about what we would have done. Interesting. I have my own theory about it. We can talk about my theory. Oh, you are lurking? You can do whatever you want, Dave. You can lurk. You can not lurk. You can do whatever you want. Let's see. Squish Puff Daves needs to advertise his games at least once in the Discord because, wow, they are good and cool. Dude, Dave's games are great. I love the group. Like, the core group of people who have been making like games with me, basically, since Neophyte is so dope. So many cool things have come out. It's awesome. And we're going to talk about more of them soon. But we can talk about my theory first if you would like. Let's see. Needs to advertise his games. Oh, hey. I do not appreciate Dave in all forms, but only his Squishy Puff form. I see. Turgid Rock Dave is a poor man's Squishy Puff. It is also 4:30 a.m. Jesus, man. You know what you can also do? You can go to sleep if you want. High lurking on 2 lengths. Dude, you are younger than me. You are younger than me? But hello. What was I going to say? Okay, I'm going to give you 2 choices. We can either talk about why would you go to sleep at 4:30? Unbelievable. We can talk about the jam. Probably talk about the jam. I'm assuming that's what Squishy Puff Dave wants to talk about, the jam, right? And it's 4:30 a.m. for Squishy Puff Dave. 1 second, I'm going to do a little smoke thing. Actually, I'm going to be like right back real quick. Talk amongst yourselves about what you want to do. Because I have my own theory about why tragedies are tragedies and why comedies are comedies, right? And I don't mean comedy in this. Why is my camera being all weird? I don't mean the comedy in terms of haha sense. I mean like the classic Greek sense. And then so we can talk about that because I like talking about that. I think it's really cool. And we'll talk about the game jam. All right. 1 second. I'm muted. We have 2 minutes tops before he comes back from the bathroom. 2:15 if he washes his hands. Yeah. Too slow, motherfuckers. And I didn't have to pee. All I had to do was go up and open the dishwasher because it was making beep sounds. You have friends in Germany who helped. Okay, game jam. Yeah, it was a speed run. Yeah, I figured out like a wall hack where you can like scoot against the wall and then you slip into the bathroom and you're already peeing, I'm very excited about my game idea, but also very excited about not talking about my game idea. Yeah. If anybody, unless like, I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, please don't, like one of my favorite things is to launch the itch window and just see all these titles. And I look at them and I'm like, I don't know what a fucking thing is. I don't know what any of this shit is. And I'm super stoked. And I always click it and I'm surprised. It's like opening a present. All right. let's minimize this, and then let's go to this. Excuse me. I always burp when I'm drinking beer, as does everyone. And manage your submissions and jams. No. Yes. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Let's make me over here and small. I'll return to the middle and big soon, but bathroom speed run, ideally bowel percent. When is this supposed to happen? That's a question I have for you all. We're still a little bit open on this. I have not published a jam yet. All right, now I turn, what do I do? Nope, that's not it. Oh, right. Duh. Okay. All right. This is a date that is perfectly changeable. All right. I know there's some people who are in school, and I don't know when it ends. So, because I haven't been there in a while. So I don't know when it ends. So I don't know when to set the start date. But I'm relatively open. Oh yeah, I was discussing how I'd like to see more work. I've been waiting. You probably have even posted something and I missed it. I added a Squish Puff Dave's art. That's new, right? Isn't that cool? So now we got Rin's eyes, we got Dave's. I don't know if anybody else has made any like Vandayaha art. Yeah, neat. Okay, so the Finish It narrative game jam. This is something that happens in writing community a lot, where like NaNoWriMo, right? Like, I am willing to bet 2% of people who do NaNoWriMo start with a fresh idea. They've never considered it before. They sit down and they write the novel all the way through to the end of the month. I bet 2% a year try to do that. And I bet the other 98% of the people who sit down and do the NaNoWriMo have various bits and bobs, novels that have failed, things that, you know, like they started writing and then life got too busy. Oh my God, I have a kid now. I got a job. I can't do it. The story isn't very good. I'm not a very good writer. You know, on and on and on and on. The sun was in my eyes. I got to walk uphill both ways. And then what was I going to say? Oh, and so they have a bunch of unfinished projects, and then, you know, the next time NaNoWriMo runs around, they're like, well, I can just copy and paste 20,000 words right into NaNoWriMo, and look at that, I'm already, you know, I wrote 20,000 words the last time I did NaNoWriMo, and now I can just continue it, and, you know, no big deal, right? And I don't think that there's actually anything innately wrong with that, right? Like, I hold on to almost all of my writing. I didn't used to, but I started to, especially when I started writing in like genre fiction, like fantasy sci-fi stuff. I started holding on to my stuff a lot more than I used to with my, like, I don't know, I'm so fucking smart, please girls find me attractive fiction. And yeah, I didn't save that. And then, but with my genre stuff, I held on to that. And it actually worked out really well for me because, like, so for example, a couple of years back, I started writing a fantasy novel about like two brothers, and I thought it was really interesting. It kind of had its roots in like Americana, right? So like, it was more of an American fantasy, but I was very, very, very heavily attempting to still kind of capture the idea of high fantasy with such a young culture, right? Because we don't have a shitload to draw on. Also, I don't know a whole lot about like early American history. Like, I know, you know, Roanoke Island and the Native Americans were here, and, you know, like, I know that shit, but like Lewis and Clark, but I didn't know I didn't know a whole lot about that history. And so what I did was I set it during the Reconstruction era, the Reconstruction era of the United States, right? So like slaves are newly freed. They're reconstructing the South. There's still a lot of tension. There's still a lot of like infighting and very scary stuff. And the main character just wants to get out, right? He's effectively the fantasy version of half black and half white. And he just wants to leave the continent. And he's just about to get out. But just before he leaves, you know, he runs into his brother who fought for the Confederates. And so it was like this really, really tense moment between these two brothers who do not like each other, right? But they have a very sordid and messy history. And so it was a lot about them and just like, and I didn't finish it. I just didn't get far enough. And I kind of ran out of stuff to talk about. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I didn't understand where it was going. I felt like I wasn't the right person to write it. You know, like it just didn't, everything about it felt wrong. And so I stopped writing it, but I had like, you know, 25, 30,000 words written into that novel. And I just sat on it for like 5 years. And then I sat down and I'm writing this new, like my attempt at a From Software game in book form. And I realized like this is just a fantastic backstory for one of the other protagonists, right? Because that was the other thing was like, even though From Software games are single protagonist games, it's so hard. It's so hard to not have that character there. I don't know. Basically, the more I'm writing into the From Software attempt, the less it's, you know, it'll make like vague gestures From Software, and it's still just going to be a fantasy book. Unfortunately, I wish I could do more, but I can't think like that. So anyway, so there was a fantastic backstory to that character. Anyway, I got super, super digressed, as I said, and let's talk about the game jam. I'm going to do a game jam soon, even before this jam. Cool. If NaNoWriMo is the push you need to keep that making art. Exactly. And that's what this game jam is all about, is to push you to finish that thing that you've been looking to finish for a long time. You know, that game that you really loved, that project you really loved, that, you know, book you really loved. You thought it was a great thing, but for whatever reason, you had to drop it and you had to move on, and you didn't finish it, right? Or you just got bored and didn't want to. Writing American fantasy sounds difficult. It was super difficult. It was very difficult, and I realized that the reason why is because we don't know exactly what to base it on, right? Like, there are bars in Germany that are older than America. Bars. It's a very young country, and you could base it on like early American history, but you're going to be playing with fire. Like, because you're either writing a Native American protagonist, and now you're a white writer writing a Native American protagonist. And I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. You can. It's just, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of research, and you're going to have to talk to a lot of people, and you're going to, you know, and I think a lot of people don't want to do it because it's a pretty sordid history, right? It's not like, oh, the Native Americans and the immigrants had a nice handshake and everything was fine. It's like, hey, have our country. That's not how it went. So it's going to be kind of difficult to like say like, hey, just so you know, I think it would be really cool to write a book about a fantasy version of your people's history, right? Or you're going to be writing it from the perspective of an immigrant or some version of it, and you're going to run into other problems. Right? So I thought, whatever, I'll just go for the most difficult one. I'll just go right after slavery ended. Yeah, specifically being a white American writing fantasy. Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. It's just tough. It's a tough thing to do. I don't think that it's unworthy. I think that people should try, and I'm going to continue to try, but like, it's tough. It's tough. And it's hard to know exactly like, okay, this is something I feel I should leave out, right? Like, this is something that I shouldn't turn the camera toward, you know? The non-distant past doesn't have a lot of mystery to play with. Right, well, and also, like, I mean, there's a pretty obvious reason why I think almost all fantasy fiction takes place in, like, a kind of a weird version of England, you know? Like, George R. R. Martin is famously using the War of the Roses, and, like, he's using a lot of historical context for a lot of the things he does in the books. Doesn't mean it's not incredible fantasy fiction. I think in part because he is using those historical contexts to couch his fantasy. But, like, yeah, you know, it's not based on America. Anyway, finish the jam. This is stuff everybody already knows. Vanda Yaha, my name's Dylan, Cathartigan, blah, 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 blah. You already know all this stuff. Okay, now we're here. We're talking about the meat and the juice. Let's move me. Let's just like make me like barely on the screen. Okay. So, some things I want to explain. You cannot start a brand new project. Does that need explaining? How do we feel about that? Because that to me seems relatively self-evident. The only thing I'm worried about is that the verbiage is as such that people think that they can submit completed games to the jam. Because I don't want the games to be completed. But I also don't want people to start something brand spanking new. Exactly. But this is the finish it jam, Corbin. This is what you have to understand. This is called the finish it jam. This is where you go back and you finish that thing. Because, man, let me tell you, I've looked through a lot of game jams. Basically, they're all kind of like random tech demos. You know, the narrative isn't done. The narrative's not done. The mechanic is like kind of wonky, but I ran out of time, and et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, this feels very weird. Okay. So yeah, the idea here is that you have to take something that you've already begun and you have to go on to finish it, right? Now, how did I write it? Let's see. Finish it, meaning that finish that project you started and forgot about, or ran out of time, or decided to do something else, whatever the reason may be. But it ought to be that project that you thought, one day I'll go back and finish it, right? Another example is like the album that I wanted to call The Bush Ears, or my series, my audio fiction series called Anthropology, right? Like, those are two projects that I would love to go back and finish, and I'm kind of leaving myself open to do that. All right. You can't start and it can't be finished already. Yes. So maybe I should just throw that verbiage in. That's actually just kind of a perfect way to phrase it. Let's see. Random tech demo seems to be the easiest with time restriction. Totally. I completely understand that. Like, I've now worked on Game Jam games. I have written for Game Jam games. I've made my own Game Jams. I have worked with you multiple times, T-Langs. I know the process and how fucking brutal it is to go through all this shit. And, like, you got a week, you know, and it's like this weird push and pull between, if I give them too much time, then they're not going to work on it. If I give them too little time, they're not going to be able to get done. And, like, it's just such a pain in the ass. And so I totally get it. But now is your chance to go back, flesh out that mechanic that you thought was so badass, write that last scene to that one game that you were looking at, you know, like, oh, if only I had been able to get this thing in. Go back, do it, finish it. Your rule sounds clear to someone who actually reads them. There will be those who mass submit to jams. Yeah, I mean, that's never gonna, yeah, you'll never get away with that. I say it all the time. I mean, I have an entire rule dedicated, I have 2 rules dedicated to it. And we still get people who are like, here's my $3 game, please review it nicely. It's like, fuck you. Anyway. All right. So here's the thing. Here we go. But it ought to be that project, right? Now we scroll down. We read this sentence. And what do I mean by project? Da-na-na-na. This jam is not restricted to games. They can be any form of digital media. All I mean by digital media is that it is that which is not simply a print fiction story. If you have a short story written in PowerPoint, that's fine. Just no bog standard Word doc with characters and scenes and stuff. Got an audio project? Submit that. Got a narrative video series? Submit that. Games, of course, will be happily accepted. The restrictions. Story. We are a narrative game jam / stream. We want to talk about the narrative merit of video games. If your project was simply a test demo of a mechanic you thought was cool, that's great, but it's not for us. If you want to submit a finished version of that cool test demo, you have to figure out how to jam a story in there. Don't know where to start a story? Look no further than our Discord, link at the bottom, or YouTube / Twitch, links everywhere. I explain how to write stories all the time. Yeah, but there has to be pixel art in it. This is too clear. It's too clear. I like this restriction, though. I feel like the normal expectation of jams means people wouldn't work on something personal. Cool. Cool. I'm glad. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Cool. I'm agreeing with this. I'm happy. All these things are making it happy. Me happy. And then this is all the shit you already know. But we can go over the really funny versions of this. Like I say again, games which were published before the game jam started will be disqualified and removed. That I think I need to change a little bit. That might be something I need to change, because this is the finish at Game Jam, and presumably most of you have published the game, and now you're going back and you're, updating the game, Maybe you have to make a new page. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Anyway, the summary lacks ambiguity. This is as clear as mud, isn't it? Absolutely. She'll be right. Yeah, this is all stuff. This is all normal stuff. Most compelling narrative. Most innovative use of the Ludo narrative. Most compelling character, best use of the optional theme. That's all normal. Time to argue my amateur chiptunes have narrative. If they have narrative, they have narrative, right? Totally. But I actually wanted to open this up to other forms of art, because like if somebody feels like they can tell a story with a piece of art, let's fucking go. Let's go. Like I almost think I need to change the title a little bit, or like figure out how to make it look more like you can submit anything to this, right? Because if you're a visual artist, visual art tells a goddamn story. So if you're a visual artist, you should submit visual art. Like if you're not a game guy, if you're not a game person, you don't know how to code. This dude, if you don't know how to do any of that shit, here's how you can participate. Here's how you can make some friends, in the game dev shit. Maybe there's a game dev who's like, man, I just hate writing stories. None of them here, but maybe we'll get one. And then this person goes, oh my God, I love doing visual art. I would love to do visual art for games. And then they come in, they submit some of their art, and then the other fucking people get to look at it. The other developers, and they go, oh, very interesting. I love that, right? And so we're going to have to talk about a couple other things, though. Yeah, I think some people would like to work on extending and polishing their... Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what this jam is for. It's the only thing this is for, is extending and polishing that thing that you wanted to go back and extend and polish. So here's some other things I want to talk about. First of all, excuse me. Too much work, too much investment. Everything must be 5 minutes long. Hey, I noticed you do art but not code. I do ode but not art. Truce? Exactly. I'm a peacemaker. That's who I am. But I'm going to join it. What was I going to say? Oh, okay. So first order of business. Number 1. It starts in 21 days, otherwise known as April 29th. How do the people feel about April 29th as a potential starting day? Damn, I couldn't find it. Now you joined. Yeah, I haven't posted it yet. It is currently unpublished. Don't worry. We're going to have a nice little celebration where we go, yay, return to Game Jams. Time is right for me, but you might find undergrads near the middle of their exams. Oh, yeah? Okay. 29 is a prime number. I move then? Okay, cool. No, that's fine. That's good. These are all fine. This is stuff, like I said at the top, this is an absolutely negotiable day because I don't know when college ends, and most of the people who submit to these things are in college, in my experience, most of them. So, for example, my first question is, Two Links, when is undergraduate education done for the year? Second question for you, Two Links, should we start it the day after school ends, or should we start it 1 week after school ends? What say ye there? Because the day school ends is pretty cool. You get drunk, you go places, you do things, right? You go home to your family, you say hi, you hang out on their couch for a while. And then you kind of settle into the doldrums of the summer. You get your job or whatever, if anybody can even do that now. You do that shit, right? So week after the Monday after school is over seems like a mistake, because while you have the energy at the very first day that you get done with school, that's a plus, that's a positive, having the energy, and you're like, great, I finished school, now I'm going to go right in before I lose my energy, which nobody has ever said, and I'm going to continue working after I finish my very, very, very easy semester of college, where I said 1,000 times I'm so busy and I have 8 hours a day to do nothing at all. At least that's what everybody that I went to school with said. And have you ever noticed that, by the way? I don't know who among you who have been to college or who are currently in college, but the number of times I heard people say, it's just I'd say oh, how's it going? Before philosophy class or whatever class I was taking, science, I don't know, anthropology. Oh, how's it going, person Y? And person Y says oh, just so busy. Really? You're so busy? I don't think you are. Because I do the same shit that you do, and I'm not that busy. And it's not because I'm smart or because I'm proactive, A lot of the time it's just people saying I'm so busy. What they're really trying to say is please don't ask me to hang out. Where are you going? All right. So that's first order of business. Is it better to do it the weekend or the next week, the next Monday after school ends? Or is it better to wait 1 week after school ends and then start up because everybody's traveled home and nobody's, you're not doing anything anymore? The surprise of going home is gone. I'm the opposite. I'm only ever moderately busy. Everyone else says they are, and I've been thinking I'm doing it wrong. I know. That's what I said. I was I was never busy. I don't know why everybody said they were busy. Because I'm doing the same shit as them. I'm pretty tired, and you're probably going soon. But hi. No, I'm not. I'm going in soon. We're going. We're chugging. We're chugging along. We announced a new game jam. It's called the Finish It. Everything's going great. To say I don't have time is to say I'd not want to. So finals are May 10th-ish. May 10th? That's super late. That's late, no? I'm all too available. I know. We all are. The one time I was busy was when I was actually fucking too sick after I finished moving. That was the one time where I was okay, I'm busy. I'm too busy. And I fucking hate going to school for 3 hours a day. It's brutal. 3 hours every day is fucking rough. especially because it's one subject and you have to just sit there and you're learning German. It's great. Like, I love learning German. It's fun to learn German. It's an incredibly difficult language to learn. But man, do you feel busy when you have to, like, hour-long train right there, 3 hours sitting in the German class, everybody's struggling to speak it. It's going so slow. You have to repeat yourself over and over and over again. But when I was in, like, undergraduate, man, it was 2 classes in the morning. Fucking, what are they, 45 minutes? You sit there for 45 minutes. You go to the lunch hall. You eat a sandwich. And then you have, like, a class at 2. That's your 3 classes of 4. You know what I mean? Like, that was your whole school. I'm busy meant I have moderate schoolwork, but I spend 2 useless hours a day in transit. Please don't ask to hang out unless it's on the bus. Yeah. I'm only busy because there are so many things I'd like to do, but not because of hard responsibilities. Who doesn't hang out on the bus? Actually, I've come to like the train. I will say this. As an American from Utah, I never took the train because our freeways are pretty good. Our streets are quite huge and our gas is quite cheap. And so I was always like, whatever, I don't give a shit. And I drove everywhere. But I got to say, I have come around. Like, I came around real quick to the bike train. First of all, because it's like $0, and second, because I just get like a good 15-20 minutes to just kind of sit there, and I'm like listening to a book or a podcast or, taking notes in a notebook or whatever. And it's just like a 15 minutes where, like, I go to a location. I feel like a dog, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, when you get into a dog with your car, or when you get into a dog, Jesus Christ, when you get into a car with your dog, and they have no idea what's going on. Like, they don't fucking nothing. Like, not a single concept is occurring in their minds. And they just, they get into this thing and they zoom to a new location and then they jump out and they're like, I'm in a different place. They have no idea what just happened. And to me, I kind of feel the same, where I'm just like, I'm a dog. I'm being transplanted to a new location. And when it says ding dong, Real-time Bahnhof, then I get off. It was my bike and I ride home. Let's see. New language learning is mentally draining. It's very mentally draining. Yeah. Especially 3 hours a day. It's brutal. Free train? No, sorry. Not free train. I meant the bike. The train is not free. The train it's not too bad. It's 73 euros a month. Yes. But you can take the train anywhere as long as it's on your route. So, like, I couldn't, this is not the whole of Germany or the whole of Europe train ticket. This is like it's a commuter ticket, essentially. You buy a commuter ticket, it's 73 euros. You can take that train whenever you want to any place that this particular train goes to, right? And that's like the towns around me. But I couldn't use that ticket to just, like, go to Berlin. Okay, that makes more sense. That would be so expensive. Yeah, it would be insane. I mean, that's impossible. The train, in a lot of ways, is actually, like, not particularly cost effective. It's only cost effective because I'm buying it in these month-long. Like, if you were to buy a ticket every single day or 2 tickets a day for your commute, it would be, you might as well just buy a car. It's way too expensive. Although gasoline, speaking of what Two Links just said, gas is cheap in the past. Yeah, I mean, gas is unbelievable here. It is like, there was a minute, like 2 weeks ago, where gas was €2.25 a liter. A liter. Do you know how many liters are in a gallon? It was unbelievable. I like, my wife's dad, I think he spent something like 180 euros to fill his tank. 180. It's insane. Same with buses in Halifax. My university subsidized yearly bus passes, and that's the only reason I could afford to bus. Daily passes are, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I don't know what it costs in America, but you don't know how many liters are in a gallon. I think there's like 2.7 liters, or it's like roughly 3 liters per gallon. It could be 2.7 or 3.4 liters per gallon. I can't remember. But it's roughly 3 liters a gallon. So it's 225 times 3. And then you make it for the exchange rate as well. $3.7 liters. Oh, it's even more. Yeah. Wow, that's nuts. Hang on. We're going to do some conversion. 3.7. Wait, what am I doing? So if it was, oh my God, Dylan, Jesus fucking Christ, please. Sorry, I'm on a tangent again. I know. Okay, so if it was 225 euro times 3.7, it was, no, I hit the plus sign. What just happened? What did I do? 2.25 3.8 if you round correctly. I didn't do this math right, did I? 2.25 times 3.7. 3.8. That's correct, right? That is the correct thing to do? No, I did 30. 3.8. That equals 8.55. So it was 8.55 a gallon. You have been talking for 85 minutes. I enjoy it. Okay, good. I'm glad that I'm glad I'm entertaining. But I'm correct in this, right? 2.25 times 3.8 would be how you were to get the number of liters per gallon, because it's 225 per liter here, and there's 3.7 in a gallon. I'm going to go with this as the math. So I think if my math is correct, my very basic arithmetic, it was, yeah, that's correct. Okay, that's price per gallon. Okay, so it was $8, or it was €8.55 per gallon, right? Now we go to euro to dollar, and we put in exactly this. So it was $9.30 a gallon. That's how much gasoline costs here. Yeah, it's in euro. Yeah, so it was $9.30 a gallon like 3 weeks ago. Because they don't do it by gallon here, obviously. They do it by liter. So like when I first came here, I was like, oh my God, gas is so cheap. It's only $1.67. And she was like, no. My wife was like, no. That's liter. That's not gallon. That's liter. I was like, $1.67 per liter? Yeah, it is unbelievable, dude. It is. I've never been so like. That was like one of the most culture shocking things to me, actually, was seeing how much people pay for gas. And it also made me realize why people don't really drive here very much. Like, okay, random question, random thought for you. When was the last time you saw a woman over the age of 65 riding a bike? Just, can you pinpoint it? Can you think of a time in which you saw a woman over the age of 65 riding a bike? A bicycle. A bicycle with pedals. I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding. Never. Never, says Tealings. Has anybody else have any other answers? Never. Drivers dislike bikers where I live. Most bikers are keen on the exercise. Yeah, so never. What about you, Dave? I don't know if you're still awake. You might be asleep. Or Rinzai. Have you ever seen a woman over the age of 65 on a bicycle? Only when I was in my hometown. In your hometown in the United States? Because what hometown was this? I need to know. San Diegans are starting to open new transit routes. Okay. Because the reason that's a little specific, but perhaps in the UK. Yeah, in the UK. I've seen old guys on bikes. Old guys, yes. Old guys, yes. Old ladies, no. Can't say I have. Very fuzzy estimation. Because I have no specific memories. Okay. You do not ask a girl her age. Okay. Well, that's very gentlemanly of you. But because the reason I'm asking is because when I came to Germany, I had no idea, it had never even occurred. If you're over 65, you probably look at it. Yeah, right. But when it never even occurred to me. And hometown is in Vietnam. Exactly. That is the primary mode of transportation for old women here in Germany. Like, I see older ladies on bikes every day in Germany. Every single day. Every day. Monday to Sunday. Rain or shine. Snow or wind. I do not look a day over 70, and you're goddamn right it's because of some kind of lotion or some shit. I don't know. But I had never seen that before. Never. I was trying to think, have I ever seen my grandmother on a bike? Have I ever seen my aunt riding a bike? Have I ever seen men with ponytails all over your streets are lousy with men in ponytails. They're very nice. They're usually, and I'm like, this sounds, it's going to sound like stereotypical and like I'm making fun, but I'm not. They're literally riding around on bicycles with the basket on the back, and there's baguettes sticking out of them and bottles of wine and shit. They're going to pick up their groceries. They picked up the bread. They picked up the wine, and they're riding back to their house on their bike with their shit. And it's not like, it's not like an old lady in what's that material called? I always laugh whenever I see people wear it, because it's like, you're not a racer. Why are you wearing that shit? What is it called? Trican? I can't remember. It's not those ladies. It's ladies wearing, jeans or like a skirt, or not like a dress. I don't know. Tracksuits, yeah. No, I mean, tracksuit isn't the word I was thinking of. I'm thinking of, God damn it. We're just doing this now. Biker cycling suit. Like this shit. Oh, I'm in the way. Like that. Lycra. That was the word I was thinking of. When I see people in Lycra, it always makes me laugh. But the old ladies are not wearing like Lycra. You know what I mean? Like they're wearing their regular everyday clothes. They're not cyclists, is what I'm saying. That is the primary mode of transportation, because why the fuck would you get into your car and spend $8 to drive to the grocery store? You can't do it. It's way too expensive. You're learning loads about game design. we had a great conversation about game design. We'll get back to it. Don't worry. Lycra is comfy, not latex. Yeah. How do you delete a George comment? But yeah, I've never seen it before, so I thought that was just very interesting. And I suspect it has something to do with gas being as expensive as it is. Okay. Reading through this. So I am going to look up the average end date for undergraduates, because listen up, liberals. How do I delete browser history? Okay. We know what to get you for your birthday next. Yeah. Listen up, liberals. I need help on determining when to start this game jam. Listen up, liberals. Holy fuck. Okay. I'm scrolling back because what day did you say this shit ends? Two lengths? Was it May 9th? That seems so late. May 10th. Okay. Average undergraduate. Did you see there's like breast size or some shit? That was super weird. Average undergraduate semester end date. I'm sure I'm not gonna find anything, but oh, good lord! Wow, what a waste of a click that was. May 10th. God, that just feels so late. I felt like I was out of school by April 21st. But you're going to like a nice school. Should be early May. Okay, snowflakes. Depends on if you're on mobile. I'm alright with this joke becoming a thing, by the way. I love these. Because they're so absurd. Listen up, liberals. How do I delete my browser history? Okay, well, I'll figure that out. I'll change the day. It'll be a little bit later. I think it's better to start it toward May for various reasons. Because I think it's better if people are not in school, because they just won't do it if they're in school. But I can't go much later than that, because then it'll have been like, half a year since I've done a jam or something. Millennials and their smartphones. Says my mother, who's always on her phone. Sorry, I love you, Mom. But okay, so anyway, yeah, so that's it. It's the Finish a Game Jam. And yeah, I want you to go back and finish something that you started and haven't finished yet. And that's it. And it doesn't have to be a game. It can be anything, really. Except for just don't submit a Word document. Just because I don't think that would be very, I mean, I guess you can, but you probably not win anything. Not that anybody wins anything anyway, but like, there's going to be a bunch of people who submit like big stuff with like music and moving images and mechanics and controls, and like, I'm not going to be the person who submits like the Word documents like, hey, please read it, like, that's just not going to be me. I've decided to finish the unfinished conversation we were having, also this Game Jam page. Turn the Word document into a Twine game. Exactly. Like, or do it in PowerPoint or whatever the Google version of that is if you don't have PowerPoint, or the LibreOffice version, Like, I'm open to pretty much anything as long as it's not submitted in a Word document. And can be submitted. Because, like, I guess you could try to write a story on Twitter or something, or like Instagram, but like, I don't know how you submit that. So it has to be a thing that can be submitted, PowerPoint is Turing complete, so you could program a game in it, I guess, if you really hate yourself. I'm looking up uni websites and they all seem to be early May. Man, it's crazy. I know that I was done with my undergraduate at April 21st. I remember that because I went up to the lake that day in Utah. Because it was like it was like the day I graduated kind of thing, which meant school was over even earlier. But it was also my senior year. I don't know. Well, in any case, we'll probably start the first Sunday of May, basically. And that would be the that would be the 1st of May. Okay, so we're going to start on the 2nd Sunday of May, the 8th of May. Unis in Atlantic Canada end in late April. Why are they holding hostage until May? Yeah, I don't know. But you got to factor in the fact that the last 2 weeks are exams, and most of the time, most people are done a week before the actual end. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So the 2nd... It's too late to start on the Ides of March. So the second Sunday of May, or should it be a Friday? Should we start on the second Friday of May? I don't know why I even said Sunday. I just feel like it's never a good idea to start on a weekday. Anyway, that's it. That was what I had planned, other than playing the game. But I think we're a little too deep in the stream now. Start on a Wednesday? Okay, I'll start on a Wednesday. Peak hours, sure. All right, so I'll start on the second Wednesday of May, and yeah, we'll go from there. So I need to make that one change. Whatever. I'm done talking about this. So it's a little too late in the stream to go back into playing a game. So we're gonna just talk. And we were talking about game design and narrative, as always. But I can't remember exactly where we left off on that discussion. I know we were talking about endings and how multiple endings tend to be bad. Or at least in my opinion, multiple endings tend to be bad. Oh boy. Oh boy, is that good or is that bad? I'm going to mute. I returned. We left off on decision making and setup and payoff. Yeah. It's very interesting. Because, like, I don't know why I adjusted that. As in, I saw a boy and I said, oh boy, okay. Because in film and theater and books, the one thing that you have control over everything. I don't get multiple endings when 95% of your playthrough would be the same. Exactly. Well, that was what kind of started this. That was what started the whole conversation off. You might have missed that part. But what we were talking about was the thing that I can't ever bring myself to do is, like, if I beat a game and I need to play through the entire game again in order to get a different ending, I'm just not going to do it. Like, I refuse. I don't want to. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I don't think that I'm having an incomplete experience of the game if I end on the one ending that I got, right? For example, I only beat The Witcher 3 once, and the ending I got was a little lackluster because I think I had chosen the bad ending, but, like, I was fine with it. And that version of Geralt kind of goes on in my mind as, like, that's the version of Geralt, and I never went and looked up any other endings for that game because I didn't want to. Because, like, the idea of there being another ending almost cheapens the concept of an ending in general. It's just like, oh, there's 3 of these? Okay, then what does it matter? Like, what Pinckney talks about, or has talked about, is the concept of sublimity, right? And we talked about sublimity last week, but sublimity, in short, is just that thing which you know becomes inevitable over the course of a story, and yet you cannot bear the fact that it's going to happen, right? Like Sophie's Choice, for example. Sophie's Choice is there's sublimity in that narrative because you know that there's going to be, well, a choice, and it's going to be brutal. It's going to be awful. Everything about it is going to be awful. But it makes for very beautiful art because there is that inevitability to it, because all of the things in the narrative are cause and effect, right? And that's what led us to the next part of the discussion, which is cause and effect. And if you don't have cause and effect, then your ending is going to be weak. And part of the problem, I think, with game narrative and most games that people are playing right now and made by game developers and designers is that in order to make a game that would have a reasonably caused ending, an ending which has causality, they would effectively have to make as many versions of the game as there are narrative arcs, right? If you chose the evil path, you would need to have an entire narrative arc of the evil path, right? You can't just have, like, the good path that then has the evil ending, because that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't work. Just can't do it. I have a whole system worked out for this. Tragedies are satisfying. Oh, that's right. We can talk about that too. I forgot about that. It matters because it was the path you chose. Totally. Right. And that's why I actually never went and looked at it ever again. I almost feel like games should do that intentionally, right? Like they should lock you out of other endings. It was not chosen for you, only written for you. We don't have to direct the choice, but to present the possible consequences. That's very powerful thematically and morally. Yeah. Only games can really do that. Totally. But to go back to Rinzai's quote about, because thank you for reminding me of that, Rinzai, that he has a whole system worked out for how tragedies are satisfying because we like to theorize about what we would have done. Right. And I think that is true, right? That a tragic story, you get the opportunity to analyze the pitfalls of behavior, right? Like if only they had seen that the mother cared about the corn, like, or whatever. I remember there was a short Flash game that you could only play once unless you wiped your cookies. Yet if the ending makes you feel regret or remorse, that is replayability. Yet, if the ending makes you feel regret or remorse, that is replayability. It had multiple endings and an impactful choice to make. I think it was choosing your daughter's life over your work, ending the apocalypse. Wow. We all care about the corn. We are children of the corn. But what I was going to say is that the grand difference between the comedy and the tragedy, and we may have to define some terms here. I don't know, maybe not. But there's the comedy is the weird one, and the tragedy I think is the more recognizable one. When we say there's a tragedy, we pretty much know that what that means is sad ending, right? Tragedy means sad ending, and comedy means it's kind of nebulous. So what comedy actually means in the traditional sense of the term is that it's not a sad ending, right? And you'll see this a lot in film, but like the number of films that end in weddings, even ones that you didn't even realize ended in weddings, is astounding. It is astounding because that's how you traditionally ended a comedy. That's how you knew if the story ended with a wedding, it was a comedy, which meant that it had a happy ending, right? If the movie ended with something sad, then it was a tragedy, right? Everybody dies. And the tragedies are usually like, and then the entire Danish court was all of a sudden killed. It's not a tragedy unless you sacrifice a goat. Yes, thank you for telling me the name. I'd forgotten. Okay. Comedy equals continuity of life. Yeah, pretty much. Well, and okay, so here's kind of the deeper structure of it. Here's the structure of comedy versus tragedy. What you will always find, in a comedy, is that the protagonist will overcome their fatal flaw. Always. So let's talk about Knocked Up. Knocked Up is a film starring Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl. Seth Rogen is like a down in the dumps, dopey stoner dude, and the movie is not very good. But it's very great for analysis because based on the description of Seth Rogen's character in this movie, what would have to happen in order for him to be able to marry Katherine Heigl at the end of the movie? He'd have to stop being a dopey, kind of waste of space stoner dude, right? And what happens at the end of the movie? He stops doing that because he overcomes his fatal flaw. He's our hero because he has things that we root for, right? Yeah, he has to knock her up. No, that's the inciting incident, Rinzai. You're not paying attention. That's the inciting incident of the narrative. That's not the conclusion. Silly Rinzai. That's the inciting incident. So anyway, so Seth Rogen, I forget the character's name, but he has many admirable qualities. He's funny. He's nice. He's, he wears funny costumes and shit. And he's relatively charming. But what I'm so uncultured for not having seen it. It's not a good movie, but it's a very good, it's a very useful tool for analysis. So, Seth Rogen, meets Katherine Heigl at a bar. They have a one night stand. She gets pregnant from it. That's the inciting incident of the film, right? And while we root for him because he is the protagonist, he has things that he needs to overcome. And by the end of the movie, lo and behold, he overcomes them, and he becomes a more functioning member of society. And Katherine Heigl, she has her own arc as well because she is a secondary protagonist, or I mean, she's probably a primary protagonist, but like, whatever. And it's a movie for stoner people, and they don't. It's not a good film, is what I'm trying to say. But she has her story arc, and I actually appreciate that they did this for Katherine Heigl's character, because a lot of the times, like in the early '90s comedy movies, holy fuck, it was so bad. I don't really like comedy movies, to be honest. I don't know if you can tell yet, or at least the American ones I've seen. So Katherine Heigl, her narrative arc is that she needs to overcome her problems with deuteragonist. Yeah. She needs to overcome her issues with needing to control everything, being kind of stuck up, and like she's too good for other people and that kind of thing. They both overcome this, and they reach this equilibrium between them, and then the movie ends in a wedding. And they all end in weddings, and that's how comedies end. Okay, so what I mean by fatal flaw is that every protagonist in every story has their desire. Luke Skywalker desires adventure, and they have their fatal flaw. In Luke Skywalker's case, it is insecurity, right? He wants a grand adventure. He's insecure. What does he need to overcome? His insecurity. What does he do? He overcomes his insecurity and shoots the thing into the Death Star. He goes, I can't believe in myself. And then Obi-Wan says, you have to believe in yourself. And he's like, okay. And then he shoots it, and then it's done. And then it ends in a fucking wedding. So Luke overcomes his insecurity, thereby making it a comedy. Right? And this goes for the same for all film. All film. And books, and you're going to be hard pressed to find in the Western mode, Rinzai, in the Western mode, you're gonna be hard pressed to find narratives which don't operate on this assumption. Now, conversely, we have tragedy, right? Now, tragedy should be relatively obvious based on what happens in comedy, right? Because tragedy is just the inverse of comedy. So tragedy is the character does not overcome their fatal flaw. Now, here's the fucking thing, and here's the cool part. I don't know. I think that's more of an epic. Here's the neato burrito thing about tragedies and comedies, is that whenever you're writing a story, most of the time you're writing both. And how you're writing both is your protagonist is going on a journey, and they are in a comedy narrative, and your antagonist is going on a journey, and they are in the tragedy narrative, right? And the antagonists do not overcome their fatal flaw: greed, lust, the other deadly sins. What about a history? I don't know what we're talking about when you say that. But or a problem play, other things that you're saying don't know what they mean. So then so your antagonist is often in a tragedy narrative. There's actually another great film that I really enjoyed called Stranger Than Fiction. It's kind of dumb, but it's also kind of enjoyable. About Will Ferrell. And Will Ferrell is living in a book. And basically the dumb premise of this book is that he's walking around, and he realizes that his life is being written by a woman somewhere in the city, right? And so he goes out to try and find her, because he's trying to figure out if his life is going to end in a comedy or a tragedy. Is he going to get married, or is he going to die at the end, right? And it's kind of this weird meta discussion on narrative, but it's also good, and it's funny and silly, and yeah, and it's a good movie. Genuinely good, unappreciated movie. Yeah, I saw it in theater. What? Uh, and but it does a really good job of explaining. Like, there's a moment. Sorry, I pop my sternum a couple times a day. There's a part in the movie where Will Ferrell has a list, and on either side of the list is comedy and tragedy, and he's taking notes of the things that are happening because he's trying to figure out before it happens if he's in a comedy or tragedy. Because if he's in a tragedy, he's probably going to die, and if he's in a comedy, he's going to get married. And he's like, "Oh shit, I'm in a tragedy." It's this great weird meta moment in narrative, and it's fun. Anyway, Cathartigan's thing about villains moving in tragedy mode. Totally. I mean, that's just how it works, right? Like, because you don't want a villain that's just going to be like a big bad thing that sucks. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I'm evil, brr, and they're evil, and they do evil things because of evil, you know, and that is not very strong for an antagonist. It's not a very strong thing for them to be. They should represent something. They should have their own backstory. If it's a genuine person, they should be more fleshed out. And when you talk to a lot of novelists, a lot of them say that you ought to be outlining every character's arc, right? You should be outlining the protagonist's arcs, and you should be outlining the antagonist's arcs, and that's how you structure their stories. But yeah, so that, in my opinion, is the difference. And it also speaks to what Rinzai was saying earlier about why we like tragedies, being that we can analyze their behavior. I think it's also why we like villains, because we analyze villains vastly more than we analyze heroes. Vastly, vastly more. Because what we're really not understanding is that the reason why the villain is in a tragedy is because they failed to overcome their fatal flaw. And their fatal flaw is something that the writer gave them. And that is usually some kind of 7 deadly sin. I like that film. Don't think I've seen all of it, though. It's a good movie. Don Giovanni is a comedy because the villain dies and goes to hell. King Richard III says he's a villain to the audience in the first soliloquy of the first scene. Yeah, because they were in, like, the 15 fucking hundreds. And that's how they did it. Because they lacked the grammatical structure for narrative telling, right? That's why at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet, the guy gets up on the stage and says the entire story to Romeo and Juliet. Two houses, both aligned in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Yeah, I know. But it's not just that. Like, King Richard III is also written, very likely, to be a tragedy. Like, his character is written to be a tragedy, you know? It's pretty great, yeah. Yeah, like in dignity, yeah. Show don't tell, fuck years. That's just how they did it then. Because you have to understand, like, theater at that time, I mean, Shakespeare was almost more famous because his theater was for common folk. That was one of the things that was most impressive about it. And common folk couldn't read in the 1500s. Right? They couldn't even read the word of God. And suddenly we have a stage full of people walking around telling each other, you know, acting out these scenes that people hadn't even really seen, other than like not on the scale, not at that, you know. And this was a very common thing to do. It was extreme. I mean, it's still common now. Like, at the beginning of so many films, you see the guy falling off the skateboard and then a record scratch, and he's like, "Let me tell you how I got here." It's like, yeah. It's like, it's the same shit. It hasn't changed. Let's see. You know something, though? Having a plot twist detail hidden in one of the very first things a story says is actually a really effective method of foreshadowing. Totally. I guess we've progressed to the point of where some audiences are getting sick of being told stuff. Yeah, we just don't need it anymore. We don't need it. The grammar has been built up. The grammar structure of narrative is so rock solid And people are so educated, and we learn so much about film, and we watch so much. We consume so much more fiction than the average person in the 1500s. Comparatively, it's like unreal. I mean, how many times did my little cousins watch Frozen 2? I mean, that is a training film. It is a training film for how structure and narrative works. I guess, yeah, and it is used. Yeah, it's used all the time. It's used all the time. It's not something that went away. It's still used. It would kill a 1500 peasant child, totally, right? And so we don't need that stuff. In the same way that I've been arguing that we need to we don't need not a single one of those superhero origin stories. Not one needs to be told ever again. Never again do we need to have a film when we reboot one of the fucking heroes again for like the 800th time. We do not need to know that Bruce Wayne's parents died. We do not need to know that Spider-Man was bit by a fucking spider. We do not need to know that Tony Stark, whatever happened to Tony Stark. We do not need to know these things. We don't. And I honestly, if they said that they're rebooting like a new superhero like Spider-Man or something, and they're like, it's the origin story of Spider-Man, I wouldn't even go see it. I wouldn't download it. I wouldn't even download it legally, because I know how he becomes Spider-Man. I don't need to see it, right? Because that grammar, that internal grammar, I'm talking Noam Chomsky here, that internalized grammar for how the language of storytelling works is so ingrained that we don't need it anymore, right? We can see it without being told it. And even then, it still happens. Even then, it still happens. But that is the explanation for why at that time they were doing that kind of thing. Right? Because nobody could read. Let's see. But yeah, so that's ultimately kind of where I fall down on the comedy tragedy thing and what I think you can take away from it, right? Because again, your antagonist need not be a person. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. But you should also probably think about it. Let's say, your narrative is nature, right? Is man versus nature or whatever, if you want to go with that one. You should probably think about how to send nature on a tragic course, right? If nature is the antagonist. Maybe people like to project their own imaginations, and authors don't always have a fresh new case to make. Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, there isn't really much of a point to it, or as much. That's something I've been saying for a while. Yeah, okay. What was I going to say though? Oh, but yeah, so like if you're writing, if nature is your antagonist, you should probably at least try and figure out how you're going to make nature go on an antagonistic journey, right? And a tragic one if nature loses in the end. If nature doesn't overcome its fatal flaw. And now you get to think about what nature's fatal flaw is in the context of your protagonist, right? Because your protagonist and your antagonist are mirror images of each other. That's why the Joker and Batman are so good. Because they're mirror images. They're mirrors of each other. Philosophically, by looks, by everything, And the Joker loses because he doesn't overcome his fatal flaw. The Batman wins because he does overcome his fatal flaw. And you can have bittersweet stuff too, right? Like, if the protagonist overcomes their fatal flaw but they don't like it, what does that mean? It's a bittersweet ending. Because they overcame it, but now they're in a position that they don't like. Historically, though, life was not as ambiguous in Shakespearean time. The Joker loses because he wears too much makeup, totally. Life was... Yeah, I agree with that. Life is not quite as ambiguous. Most of the time, because you were dead by the time you were my age. You know what I mean? Like... It wasn't very ambiguous because you had to get married at 14 and work on the farm or go to war, and you died of dysentery because there was no hospitals. Yeah. So yeah, life was not quite as ambiguous. Oh God, my sternum. I have to pop it like a lot. Ever since the gallbladder surgery, it's weird. But I don't think that also means that. I don't even, I'm not even going to get into that. I'm going to go back to that last point I was making. The mirror imaging thing, and the idea of playing with the concepts of endings, and that's actually one of the factors of the predecessor culture that is considered redemptive of that time. I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to. That life was unambiguous. Is that the factors that you're referring to? Not the dysentery. Okay. But yeah, so you can play with these concepts. You can do weird things with them. You can invert them, right? So like, for example, one of the things that happens very, 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 very frequently in traditional narrative is that the protagonist will give up on their journey, right? They'll give up overcoming their fatal flaw. They'll go, I can't do it. I can't beat him. I'm just going to go home. I'm going home now. And then their ally will come in and they'll say, hey, you can do it. You just got to believe in yourself, or you got to get over your alcohol problem. And then the protagonist is like, alcohol problem? Oh my God, I had no idea that it was alcoholism. They put the bottle down, they go back into the final battle, and they beat the shit out of the antagonist because they overcame their fatal flaw of alcoholism, right? So that's the ally attack scene. That's where the ally comes in and he attacks the protagonist, or he or she or they or whatever. They attack the protagonist and they say, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you can't blah. And then the protagonist goes, oh my fucking God, I can't believe it. You're right. And then they fix it, and then they go in and they finish the story, right? Alcoholism is super easy to overcome in stories. And then, but you can play with this stuff. So like, you don't have to have the ally attack scene right before the final battle. That's typically a roundabouts where it happens, but you don't have to have it there. What you can do is you can actually move it to right after the inciting incident or right before the inciting incident. That's weird, because now the ally who's attacking says, hey, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you're an asshole. And then the protagonist goes, what the fuck are you talking about? They've rejected change. They've rejected the change. Now they might be on a course for tragedy. Oh, what are we going to do here? Right? Little things you get to play with. It's fun. Moana approached that differently, and I've seen lots of people say that they appreciated that. How did Moana approach it? I tried to watch that movie. I would admit to being a flaw in my personality is that I just cannot watch musicals. I acknowledge that some of them may have very good stories. I can't watch them. Modern stories don't need more heroines, just less heroine. What? I think anybody who wants to write anything they want should write about it. Any protagonist you want, you write a protagonist. Uncle Ben style. Well, it's about time to wrap up the stream. We'll go a little bit longer, but because I wanted to read. Moana had a moment of the hero giving up, and her dead grandma ghost came up from the grave to say, you know what, if you want to go home, do so. You're just a kid. Oh, okay. But she doesn't, right? So they invert the ally attack scene. With great power comes great responsibility speech. And Moana cries a bit, but she does save the day and stuff. Yeah, I mean, inverting the ally attack scene. Because, okay, so here's the interesting thing. That means that she's rejecting her elders. Is the narrative about her rejecting her elders? Or is it about her? She has a father, right? Does she overcome something with her father? How does that work? Because like, Disney movies are great because they're so on the nose about stuff like this. She does reject her dad's direct request to stay the fuck away from the ocean by diving straight into the ocean with a boat. Do you believe that a play is worse if you know the outcome? What about prequels? I definitely don't think that a story is worse if I know the outcome. 100%. I don't think that the story is worse. But if the outcome is good and I haven't seen it. Not quite about rejecting her elders. Okay. Because man, this is interesting. Because like her grandma's being very nice to her when she says that you can just go home because you're just a kid, which is like a funny haha moment because it's like. Because we recognize this fucking scene, by the way. Like, we know what scene this is because it's in every movie and every book and everything. And so when you see it in the theater, you're like, ha ha ha, why did I laugh? Like, what? I don't know why I just laughed there. It's because it is inverting it. Moana does want to lead her people, but she also wants to sail, go in the water. Okay. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah, the first time she fails, gets tossed back to the shore by the waves. Yeah, I mean, that's just like Independence rejecting her, and like, it's all very classic. So Romeo and Juliet is fine. Totally. I think Romeo and Juliet is a great story. I just don't want to see Spider-Man's origin story again. Also, it's learning that her ancestors were voyagers that spurs her onto her journey. Interesting. Does she cry sadness or does she cry happiness when the grandmother says you can go home because you're just a kid? Is she like, my grandmother doesn't believe in me? Or is she like, I miss my grandma? I should just watch the movie. I should just see the scene. That would probably help our discussion on it. I do wish more stories had less ambiguity, but simply made a complex point with angles. We'll do it. I'd have to watch it again. One sec. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. We don't really have to like do a deep dive on the ally attack scene in Moana, but I do think that like if you were to go and look at that scene and just kind of just watch that movie again and like analyze it, we'd be good. Anyway, I actually have to go, so I'm gonna head out now. Sorry, I gotta take the dog out. She cries in shame. Oh, shame. Oh, that's a very interesting idea. That's the plan. Good. I'm glad that's the plan. All right, so this jam's gonna go up like probably tomorrow morning because I'm gonna run out of time. But yeah, I'm gonna head out now. I hope you guys have a good day, good evening, whatever it may be, and I will see you next time and I'm on the Discord. Goodbye. Hold on. I can't. I gotta go. What did Corbin say? She cries in shame from her failure and her grandmother comforts her. Oh, she cries in shame. Oh, comfort. Oh, weird. Okay, we're gonna have to keep talking about it. But not now because I really do have to go. I'm sorry.